Welcome to Following Fenna. This is the third podcast for when someone has a broken heart, and I guess that someone is you. Now, with this podcast, I want to talk to you, and hopefully I can soothe you a little bit, and maybe you fall asleep while I talk a bit about grief and broken hearts. When I went through a heartache, I was longing to hear about other people's experience, but also to have a soothing voice talk to me, but there was not that much out there. So I hope I can help you with this. And like I said in my earlier podcast, no, we're not gonna talk about how you should move on. That's not what this podcast is about. This is about acknowledging your grief. And here we go. Now, whether you have a broken heart because your relationship just ended, or your situationship, or maybe your unrequited love, or you just went no contact with a person that you were attached to or limerent for, it doesn't really matter. You are allowed to grieve, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to help you grieve. Not that grief needs help. Grief follows its own path and its own pace, but still I can soothe you a little and hopefully give you some hope that this is temporary. Because I've been there. I've been in so much pain I thought my heart would stop. In so much pain that I thought I could not handle it. My body and nerve system were so upset and also angry, throwing tantrums by the detaching, that my body went in panic mode for a few weeks. I could not calm down except for 1 hour in the evening when my body was done fighting and battling all day. I was detaching the hard way, and I had to go through the withdrawal that comes from being attached, and in my case addicted to a person. And even though it was my choice, even though I knew this was for the best, my whole system went in shock. And I got triggered by everything. And I mean everything. And I know you also get triggered, but for me, even the color green reminded me of them. Just imagine how awful this is. Just being triggered by the color green. And especially when my friend, well-meaning, took me to a weekend in the forest. And I spent 3 days crying in a cabin. I couldn't really eat. I couldn't really sleep. All I did was just cry. And the crying did not stop for months, by the way. But I'm going to give you some good news. When we are attached to someone, like a romantic interest, our dopamine gets affected. When we get attention from this person, we feel good. When we don't get their attention or the validation or reciprocity, we feel bad. And that has to do with the reward system in our brain. And when you have to detach from a love interest, your dopamine goes to an absolute low point. But hear me out. After only 4 weeks of walking around with an empty dopamine bucket, your body starts to produce dopamine again. And that will not mean that your grief and your sadness and your pain will be instantly over, but you will feel a bit of dopamine. That means that you will start to enjoy little tiny moments. I wanted to say hormones. Your hormones are coming back in balance, slowly but surely. And the other good news is that our brain is plastic. It reshapes, it reforms, and it rewires all the time. That's a good thing, actually, in the grief process. We call this neuroplasticity. So we are made to get over things. And I know you don't believe me. But look at how we are made. We have neuroplasticity. The brain is constantly changing, and memories will be filed, emotions will be processed. And there is also this thing called memory decay. That means that slowly over time we feel less emotion over certain memories in general. Does not mean it will not hurt a little bit anymore, but less and less and less. Grief is a process. A very painful process, I know, but a healthy process. A natural process of detaching. And when you are suffering right now, that means that this is detaching in progress. So you are detaching, you're in the middle of it. That means that there's a beginning, a middle, and there's going to be an end to it. Now, when I was in grief, I had this pain in my upper body and in my heart for months. And I started to get a little bit worried, and I contacted the heart organization, and they told me what I already knew since I work with children with trauma, and I kind of know how the body reacts to stress. It's normal to feel your heart after very stressful events, and having a broken heart is tremendously stressful. And the interconnection between the heart and the brain is recognized more and more. Heartache is ache. It hurts. There's even this thing, and you probably heard of it, called the broken heart syndrome. And what happens here, that if you have the broken heart syndrome, you're not having a heart attack, but the shape of your heart changed. And the other name of the broken heart syndrome, and I'm going to pronounce this slowly. It's a Japanese name. Itakostubu, cardiomyopathy. And this is provoked by a stressful event, and the left chamber in your heart does less pumping. And the name stems from a Japanese object. It's this sort of ceramic vase to catch octopus. So they called this name, they gave it the name after the shape of the vase. Now, normally the heart will recover and will establish itself over a few weeks' time. But it's more fact that when you have a broken heart, your body strongly reacts, and it's extremely painful, and the pain is real. Now, another reason why we hurt so much when we leave someone or someone left us is because the brain always tries to keep track of our important bonds we have, because that's very handy for survival, to kind of know where people who are important to you and you are attached to it, where they are. So the brain always tries to keep track of the important bond, and subconsciously it tries to predict where and when and if there's a reunion going to take place, and how deep and how safe the bond is with this person. Now, if someone goes away for what reason, and we don't really want them to go, we don't want them to break up with us, or we kind of don't want to let them go, but we have to. The brain starts to try to predict in overdrive, in the where, the when, and how deep. And that's also one of the reasons why we think about them so much when we are in grief. Now, like I always say, you can't really speed up grief. You cannot decide that, one day you've had enough. Okay, this has been fun. Well, not really, but I've had enough. Thank you, grief. I'm going to stop now. That's not really how it works. You cannot put any timeline on grief. It takes as long as it takes. And you only can follow the grief. And you can feel sorry for yourself that you must endure so much pain. That being human really hurts sometimes, especially when you have attachment wounds and you are in a limerent episode, or when you have a broken heart. And of course, I could not see it at the time. But once on the other side of my heartbreak, there were really, really nice things waiting. Wonderful things even. And I wish I had known that then. I was journaling and I was hopeful, but I also thought, and maybe you're thinking the same, I'm never getting out of this. I wish I had known what good things were waiting for me, but okay, I didn't. That's not how things work. When we are in grief, we hope, but we kind of cannot imagine ever getting past this. And I always kept my hope, even though it took so long before I was happy again. It took me 2 years actually. But I always kind of kept hoping. And here I am, a bit calmer, a bit stronger, and very much wiser. Was it worth the pain? I would say no, but it did happen anyway. So, okay. And I can genuinely say that I'm more happy than ever before. I got over it. And so will you. If you want me to do more of these soothing podcasts, or if there's a specific topic that you want to listen to while you're trying to fall asleep, please leave it in the comments. Well, maybe not now because you're half sleeping, hopefully, or at least you're relaxed. But maybe tomorrow you can put it in a comment and I'll read it. I read all the comments. I really love it when you anticipate in my channel because I think it's such an important subject. Grief and limerence and self-compassion and being in pain. And we all share the same pain. And if you've never been in a limerent episode, I'm sure you know how heartbreak feels. And if you have been in a limerent episode, I'm definitely convinced that you know what heartbreak feels like. It's the raw, seemingly never-ending pain. And I can tell you, and probably so will other people tell you thousands of times, that you'll get over it. Hopefully bringing in some science gave you some hope and soothed you a little bit. I hope you can sleep. Good night.